On the 25th of June 2023, in the middle of a normal, sunny day at the Grona Lund theme park in Stockholm, Sweden, a train on the Jetline rollercoaster came to a screeching, juddering halt. The stop was so violent that 3 passengers were thrown from their seats, tumbling to the ground below in front of shocked parkgoers. Within minutes, park mechanics and fire rescue workers were on scene, tending to the injured and planning an evacuation of those still trapped on board the coaster. It would, however, be months before anyone would understand just what exactly had gone wrong with this well-loved roller coaster in a park with a long and excellent safety record. Grona Lund, a name which translates to Green Grove, was first founded in 1883, when German showman Jacob Schultheis rented a patch of land on the waterfront in Stockholm. He installed a horse-driven carousel and several circus acts, including strongmen and sword swallowers. It proved popular, and steadily grew with the addition of several new circus acts over the years. After the founder's death, the park was taken on by his son, Gustav Nilsson, who found himself facing unexpected competition. In the 1920s, another park opened directly adjacent to Grona Lund. It was called Nöjesfältet, a name which translates to amusement park, and was home to a thrilling wooden roller coaster. For some years, both parks competed fiercely, installing new attractions and rides, building dance halls, holding rival events, and competing for the attention of the park-going public of Stockholm. During this time, Gustav Nilsson's daughter fell in love with the son of the rival park owner. The pair met in secret for many years, until eventually both their fathers died within the space of just a few months in 1940. Now free to pursue their romance, they married and amalgamated the parks under the name Grona Lund. Grona Lund remained in the family until the early 2000s, at which point it was sold to Parks and Resorts Scandinavia AB. By 2023, it was a thriving and modern theme park with many attractions, including several roller coasters and many flat rides. It was considered one of the best parks in Sweden and had an almost unblemished safety record. One star attraction was the Jetline roller coaster, which had been added to the park in 1988. It was a thrilling steel roller coaster, a ride on which lasted about 90 seconds and saw riders plunging downhill at speeds of up to 90 kilometers or 56 miles per hour. The coaster was designed by well-known German manufacturer Schwarzkopf, but built by another German firm, Zera. In the decades since its construction, Schwarzkopf had gone out of business, but Jetline continued to operate. Year after year, it entertained hundreds of thousands of riders. On the 25th of June 2023, at around 11:35 a.m., Train E, carrying 11 riders, was dispatched as normal from Jetline's station. The ride operators noticed nothing amiss, although some of those riding in the train later reported that the ride seemed noisier and shakier than usual. About 1/3 of the way through the ride, there was a massive jolt and a loud sound of scraping metal. The whole roller coaster structure shook, and passengers in Train E were thrown forward against their lap bar restraints. The jolt was so powerful, in fact, that one passenger's lap bar bent out of position, causing them to fall from the train to the ground below. The train rattled on along the track to the accompaniment of the sound of shrieking metal. Another jolt sent 2 more riders tumbling out of the train. Their lap bars bent out of place to the point they offered no protection. One of these riders fell to the ground. Another slammed into a metal support beam. He was able to grab onto it, clamber up onto it, and remain there until help arrived. The train screeched onward a short distance, but it had lost most of its speed. It failed to complete the next hill, rolled back down the track, and stalled. Ride operators immediately called park maintenance staff and the emergency services, while park guests clambered over the fence surrounding the coaster to offer first aid to the victims now lying on the ground. The Greater Stockholm Fire Brigade were on scene within 10 minutes, and swiftly used a ladder truck to rescue the ejected person trapped on a beam, and then to carefully evacuate the remaining passengers in the train. Many had injuries to their hips, torsos, and faces, or internal injuries as a result of the multiple sharp jolts they had experienced. At the same time, ambulance staff arrived to assist the 2 injured riders on the ground. One was transported to hospital with serious injuries. One was declared dead at the scene by an emergency doctor. As the rescue operation took place, the entire park was evacuated. Park maintenance staff worked with firefighters to make the scene safe and ensure that those still trapped on the train could be evacuated in a timely fashion. The whole operation was completed within 1 hour of the crash. The Swedish Accident Investigation Authority immediately launched an investigation. The failure was quickly traced to a metal component known as a control arm. These were angled metal arms onto which the wheel assemblies for each car were mounted. It appeared that a control arm at the front of the train had failed completely during the accident, causing the wheel assemblies to detach and fall to the ground. This had left the very front of the train unsupported, and it had thus slammed repeatedly into the track as momentum carried the train onward. These impacts had been so jarring that they had resulted in passengers being thrown from the train despite their lap bar restraints. The control arms were vital components and were regularly inspected. In years past, whenever cracks had been found in the control arms, they had been repaired as a priority. In 2019, during an annual teardown and detailed inspection, some control arms were found to be too worn to reasonably repair. Entirely new components would have to be fabricated. Normally, a park would purchase new components from the original manufacturer, but in this case, the manufacturer, Schwarzkopf, had long since gone out of business. So, instead, the park supplied a trusted metal fabricator with the original design drawings Schwarzkopf had made, and asked them to produce new control arms based on these. The park mandated that the parts undergo a forensic inspection before they would be accepted, but made no other stipulations for the fabricator to adhere to. This fabricator, Mekosmos, further subcontracted the work to another company, without informing the park. This subcontractor, Göteborgs Mekaniska Verkstad, or GMW, encountered some uncertainty about the design drawings. Did the control arms include a backing bar, an extra metal brace inside the tubular steel structure to give each arm strength and rigidity? A worker at the firm struggled to determine whether the drawings called for one, and referred to his supervisor, who examined the drawings in turn and told him that there was no need for a backing bar. Thus, 5 control arms were manufactured without backing bars. They passed inspection and were delivered to the park. 1 was discarded due to damage sustained during transit, but 4 were kept, and 2 were put into service on Jetline rollercoaster trains. One of these control arms was the one that failed on the coaster in 2023. It had, indeed, failed due to the lack of a backing bar, as well as to defects in several welds. It emerged that the worker who had completed the welding on the control arms had not only been uncertain about the design drawings, but had also not held the relevant qualification to be carrying out welding work of this kind. It was observed that the use of a contractor who had themselves hired another contractor had created communication issues. GMW had not had any contact with the park, and so had not been in a position to seek further clarification. They had thus produced the vital control arm component incorrectly. All 3 firms were charged with criminal offences, including negligence. Grona Lund was found to have been negligent for not specifying that the work be completed by a correctly certified welder, and not providing sufficient documentation for that welder to work from. They were fined 5.2 million Swedish krona, the equivalent of about $540,000 US. GMW was fined 1.3 million, the equivalent of about $136,000 US. Mecosmos was acquitted. Investigators also considered why the lap bars had deformed so severely as to become useless. It was found that they had been subject to forces much greater than they had been designed to handle. While sufficient to restrain riders during normal operations or during an emergency stop, the forces enacted on them during the accident had been so great as to damage the bars and render them useless. In the wake of the disaster, the Jetline rollercoaster was permanently closed and removed from the park. Grona Lund adopted a raft of new safety measures, in particular relating to the sourcing and inspection of components. Recommendations were also made to the Swedish government to increase state oversight of amusement park rides. The accident drew attention to a problem that many parks face: the difficulty of securing adequate replacement parts when the original manufacturer is no longer in business. This matter was studied by the International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions, which published a report with recommendations that could be applied by other theme parks. Recommendations that may, one day, prevent another similar accident elsewhere in the world.